Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our conversation about how Hollywood creative teams are working through this remarkable time. And we're talking about working in the cloud to find good solutions during this remarkable time. I'm Jim Chabin from the Advanced Imaging Society. Thank you for joining us. After a year of bleak news, this past week has begun to reveal some very promising headlines. After getting many more productions back to work this month, the AIS stakeholder studios and streaming members are now bracing for what they're calling the busiest production boom we maybe have ever seen in Hollywood over the next 12 to 18 months. COVID cases are down 50% just in the last month, and experts are now forecasting improving conditions for a return to more normal lives later this year. Finally, the New York Times and Washington Post this weekend both see consumers ready to spend money on movies, meals, and more. But getting all that content produced is more challenging than ever. The world's greatest creative community has been given the ultimate problem. How do you create ever more impressive VFX-driven content with teams that may need to be physically disconnected from each other and their workstations? We are honored to have 5 all-stars in their field to share their views this morning. Emily Birch is Development Operations Engineer from ILM X-Lab. Rami Katrib is the founder and CEO of Digital Film Tree. John Canning serves as executive producer at Digital Domain. Anna Claiborne is SVP of Engineering and Product for Packet Fabric. Ben Ferguson serves as EVP of Network and Cloud Architect at Shamrock Consulting. And they're all here joining us live to talk through this. Let's start with John and Rami and Emily and John, starting with you. How has the last year, how has the last 6 months been as far as workflows? You've moved to the cloud. What's that process been like? Just take us quickly on a journey of what your life has been like over there.
Sure. One surprise after another, right? Over the past 6 months, year, we've seen the acceleration of things that we've all talked about, or we've been trying to get our organizations to do, or we've been thinking are a good idea to come to, no, we're going to do that. So in March, Digital Domain, we basically went virtual. And the process was actually, a few road bumps here and there. Don't ask our systems guys. Because our studio had already been, a lot of the artists had already been working on thin clients, even in the studio. We have a central data center up in Portland, between offices in Montreal and Vancouver and LA. So some of that was already there. Although suddenly when you realize your organization needs a one-to-one mapping of every VPN token, whoops. So it was a process of virtualizing the studio. And I would say that we've been pleasantly surprised how well that's gone. Now there's road bumps and, somebody can't do something that day because their home internet's out or whatever. But
I want to get to that in a second. Emily, real quickly, ILM, what's your view? How would you check in on this?
Yeah, for our cloud usage, we've mostly been driving in that direction to begin with. So this last year, as John said, has been sort of an acceleration of that, of us seeing where we can seize the opportunity of really speeding up some of our systems and our feedback for our users in that way. So it was really sort of part of our roadmap to begin with. And this was just a sort of further proof that we were on the right path, that in case something did happen, we have this resiliency.
Rami, when we talked at one point, you were in the middle of delivering NCIS episodes. And so your journey has been through the safety protocols and a million other factors that affected. What has your migration been like for the cloud?
Well, pre-COVID, the notion of cloud-based production and post was actually a slow ebb. And I mirror a lot of what was said already. Everyone was kind of going in that direction. In our case, our pre-existing remote cloud services for post and production were for people that were very motivated to avoid the 405, and that were already working from home, but that was novel. In the last year, it's been absolutely bananas because, everyone was at home it was just a sudden reality. And I think it caught obviously everybody off guard. In our case, we just started to expand and support not only, creative clients, but other vendors in the areas of networking and home security, which was not really a thing yet. But now, remarkably, how we did things at the facility is how we do things for folks at home. That same kind of enterprise level networking and security and support are for folks at home at scale. And it happened all of a sudden. So for us, I'm just glad we had started to invest time and energy in areas like cloud-based workflows and security more than anything, really, because the home was never that secure. And then all of a sudden everyone was at home. So it became a monster pain point. All of a sudden the studios had to figure out what is everyone doing,
And was the move to the cloud already well underway and the COVID exacerbated it? Or was the cloud a solution to having, all of these workers working remotely? Where did the cloud come into it as a solution, and when?
Well, I think it really started late March. I'll put it like this: evangelizing cloud-based post-productions, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, was not exactly an easy sell to our community, right? People would find it interesting. A lot of people would invest some time and energy and research into it. But when COVID happened, that discussion just went away. All of a sudden we had to solve for networking and security with professionals at home. And just to mirror another point that was said, pre-COVID, you're talking about millions of people that drive our M&E ecosystems. They would drive around routinely. They would go to facilities, they would go to production sites. And now that just radically changed, where you are trying to do the same type of activities like visual effects, color correction, remote dailies from home, both as client and as service provider.
Let me bring in Ben Ferguson. Ben, you're with Shamrock. You're kind of agnostic outside consultants who come in and try to fit the right solution to a client's challenge. What's the last year been for you? And if you were going to graph it as far as activity, did it spike beginning in March? What's your last year been like, and what kinds of phone calls were you fielding that you hadn't heard before?
It's kind of funny. March was a heck of a month. It was every project we've been talking about over the last 2 years needed to be done in 2 weeks. So we got some crazy calls in March of everything that would have taken maybe 4 to 6 months needed to be condensed into very tight timeframes to get companies working remote, in a distributed sort of digital nomad workforce with still a secure zero trust framework. So that was the bulk of what we were fielding. And what was interesting, because a lot of media and entertainment have been trying to figure out this whole cloud thing, right? They understand, okay, maybe it's bigger, faster, cheaper, but it got into the COGS discussion, or cost of goods sold, right? And so every shop in town knows the cost of render nodes and storage on a monthly rental, and they were trying to figure out this whole variable usage world of cloud computing and how they could make it predictable. And so that's been an ongoing discussion for years and years. But now it was more like, we're going to sort of jump in and sort of guess and check along the way. And so I hadn't seen people jumping in with both feet like that ever in my career. And it's funny. I saw this poll on LinkedIn that turned into a meme, and it was who is the largest driver of digital transformation in your organization? A, the CEO, B, the CTO, C, the COO, or D, COVID-19. It was like 85% COVID-19. It's become a meme.
Yeah. Anna Claiborne from Packet Fabric. your company kind of attached some rockets to it this past year when Dave Ward left Cisco as chief architect and joined Packet Fabric as your new CEO. And then COVID hit. So what kind of solutions have people been urgently in need of that you have responded to?
I'd like to point out that David joining didn't have any correlation with COVID.
Or did it?
Or
That's a good question. That's a good
dun,
question.
dun, dun.
But seriously, the drivers that we saw once COVID hit were across the board. I can't say that they're just for one particular thing. It was for hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and also co-location connectivity. All of those things just spiked incredibly, depending upon the particular both vertical and individual company involved. You know, because we deal with many people outside of the media and entertainment space, as well as many within the media and entertainment space. And so I would say that particularly to the media and entertainment space, it was the hybrid cloud and multi-cloud connectivity that all of a sudden we saw just an insane amount of demand for. And that pretty much, you know, that is following in the footsteps of what everybody has already said, that, you know, there's no doubt they were correct, is that became a very big thing.
Emily, Tales from Galaxy's Edge you used a newer cloud-based workflow, which you kind of have told us helped you to get more done in a shorter time. And Ben mentioned, you know, when we needed solutions this year, it was I need it in 10 minutes. What did that do for Tales from Galaxy's Edge for you?
Yeah, you know, we sort of always aware from Vader Immortal and all of our previous work of how long some of these workflows take. So we had been eyeing the cloud as a way for us to sort of speed up these processes, these build times and lighting builds, and really get feedback to our artists and our engineers in a much faster fashion. So with everything happening with COVID, that accelerated a number of our plans of being able to suddenly say, okay, all right, well, we can't do this here. So how can we architect this in the right way in the cloud to be able to run things in parallel at a much faster speed?
Probably a year ago, 18 months ago, certainly after the Sony hack, almost everyone said that cybersecurity and content security was in their top three, two or three musts. You're in an organization where a lot of people are interested in what you're doing. So you probably are super, super sensitive on protecting your processes and content. How did that work for you? Are you able to get your security, but also be comfortable with cloud?
You know, and that's absolutely the balance that you really have to strike. I started out my DevOps career in health insurance. And so health insurance has a huge number of regulations and who's allowed to see what data, where can it live, that sort of thing. And it actually translated really well to studios because IP is our product. So we need to keep that as secure and locked down as possible. But it's that interesting balance of how many hoops are acceptable to a user to be able to actually use something. So that has been a bit of back and forth for security reviews of finding that right place.
Yeah, I mean, I could say that. I mean, it just, if you look at what CDSA has been going through in TPN, and you know, just now, most of the cloud, a number of the cloud providers are getting together, and they're all trying to come up with the protocols of how do you work with cloud. And it was usually from organization to cloud and back to organization. Adding in the consumer at home throws a bit of a monkey wrench in that. You know, what can you expect, you know, your employees to do at home? For example, certain security protocols for certain projects require machines are locked down, you can't plug in USB to them and things like that. Well, how does that translate to a machine at home? That's where it gets interesting to be working on the thin client solutions where, again, you're eliminating necessarily potentially hardware at home, but that means you sent stuff to people's house. And, you know, I don't know how many of you had employees swinging by the office and like your name was on a post-it on a piece of hardware that you carried out the door. The physical security aspect of this is just like it's going to be interesting, and it is I think somebody said the Pandora's box that it's open.
John, Digital Domain was founded by James Cameron, a man known for being relatively insistent on pretty high standards. But you're starting to turn to cloud for certain workflows. Where are you finding it useful to you, and a solution that you can embrace here?
Yeah, and like I said, the interesting thing is we were early on as a technology / VFX company, so we had our private cloud, right? So that wasn't, and I would say it's interesting is we're a legacy company in this business where we have a private cloud, and how are we transitioning? Because again, you look at the cloud-based services, there's capacity out there. When we get those render bottlenecks where we're going to have to expand, we can't expand our farm fast enough. You can't put enough rental machines. How do you burst to the cloud? But it was always one of those sort of emergency measures or starting to contemplate. Now it's much more embracing that as that is how we will expand. We still have a private cloud, a lot of it's paid for. That cost is going to be the cost of goods is still cheaper than bursting. But the interesting thing comes into things like immediacy of access, right? I can throw a bone to our friends at Packet Fabric, and the conversation of like, how quickly can we get to the remote data centers? And latency does matter, and you start getting into these issues where before it was, we're moving data over there, and it's not as critical. Now things are much more critical. This and security protocols are constantly, we had projects we had to four-wall inside our building where literally there was a room that was locked that other employees couldn't get into. How do you do that now? It's still an open question.
Do you see this as an eventual full conversion? Do you move completely to the cloud?
I think it's proved that it works. I think it and in some cases, I think it's forced technology acceleration in areas that were good enough before, or that's okay, to no, we got to solve that problem before we can do it. I think it's driving the economics. It's certainly good that there's numerous companies in this business that you have needs. You want to be able to shop around. You've got price competitiveness that is important. What's interesting is I think we're all looking at, various businesses are looking at when we return back to the office and how much we need to return back to the office. And I think that's what's liberating is now we know we've seen an increase in productivity. Let's face it, anecdotally, how many of you managed to go do that errand that normally you'd be like, I'm going to need to get out of the office, and who's going to, now that's, people are able to get on with something.
So you're saying you've seen an increase in productivity during this period, and 6 or 8 months ago or a year ago, everybody was pretty much convinced that this would decrease our ability to get things done, right? Decrease, not increase.
Not everything is easier, right? Like I would say creative collaborative sessions are a bit more difficult, but some of the productivity we see increasing and some of that balance.
Rami, would you say that your clients and your shows that you're working on, how do they view the cloud? Does it enable them to do things they couldn't do? Is it, cheaper, faster, better? How do they view it? How do you view it?
Well, I mean, for us, because we've been able to pivot over the years, for at least 6 years, our clients enjoy simple benefits like storing all their camera raw on our private cloud, right? That's been going on for years. And we know empirically that if you just do that, your efficiency goes up exponentially. So we went down that road years ago. So, in terms of our clients, it was kind of business as usual. They were used to the idea. And like I said earlier, remote and cloud-based workflows has been a slow ebb. I think what's happened now is that people are recognizing that it was there all along. And arguably the biggest pain points right now is how you help, creatives and teams that are at home, right? That's the biggest challenge right now, because the home is not exactly where you set up enterprise routers per se and have someone support you with your home internet service. But that's exactly what we've been doing, and that's what we are doing more than ever. So think of this: camera raw payloads coming to the home, right, on a secured system while they're sleeping. So when they wake up, it's there. So a lot of it is just logistical. I call it IP logistics, right? Just managing the humanity of it, showrunners, producers, VPs. The other thing that I have to note has absolutely spiked is the notion of virtual production over Zoom, right? Where you can iterate on your creative environment, TechViz, Previs, while you're at home, weeks and months before you go to the physical location. And another thing that's developed from that momentum is the idea of safety, planning safety before you go to set, not just for the creative part, but all the humanity that needs to be there. And
So COVID safety.
Yes, absolutely. Coordinating with the COVID safety officers. Essentially, all the production heads have to now deal with this. And my sense, it's a mishmash, right? In the global production. Some are doing it really well. Some are not doing it well. And a lot of people are in the middle. Everyone is coping. But that's what's so inspiring. Like, our community is trying to figure this out, both on the production side and then post-production and then downstream.
Yeah.
Are we moving? Go ahead.
I was just a quick add to that. And, it's, different organizations in the industry are trying to coalesce around best practices and things like that. I know the Producers Guild, for independent productions has pushed out some safety guidelines and everything. But it's key that everybody in the industry consistently kind of checks in, because again, the sad part is a lot of these are recommendations. There's very few definitive, this is what you got to do. It's mostly best practices. So SAG and others, but I think we're all, it's one of these things where everybody's looking at what everybody else is doing. Oh, okay. How do we make sure that everybody feels comfortable on set? But it's an overhead and a tax that to business that is, it's unpredictable, right? We call it the COVID tax, when we're looking at our numbers, because it's a cost that's going to be added to things. It's unpredictable. If you're
gonna pick a percentage of how much people need to add to production, what would it be?
Oh gosh, that's a good question.
Rami, what would you say?
I mean, from about 15 or so projects that we've had direct interaction with during COVID, 25%.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Are you seeing a future where we go camera to cloud?
Yeah, they're already.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I started using that term years ago, and it's kind of cool to now hear other people using it. But of course, it's just a matter of really getting the camera raw material, the source material, the camera negative. That's always been the hardest thing. You got to get that somewhere as quickly as possible.
Anna, go ahead, Rami. I'm sorry, didn't mean to.
That was it. Just as soon as you get the camera raw, then anything is possible. But right now it's a mishmash of some files in the cloud, these files, but not the source. That is novel.
Anna, what's the future of connectivity at the edge?
So connectivity at the edge is a really hot topic right now in a lot of different spaces, and we see some cool stuff happening, like 5G in the U.S. and in other places in the world. So 5G has the potential to give us that super high speed edge. We already have it kind of with 4G, and in terms of like when you're talking camera raw footage, it's all about bit rate. Like how much bandwidth can you move between the edge and the cloud? And that is all a factor of frames per second encoding, all that, and how much you're gonna actually move. And The ability is kind of there with 4G today and some other things, but with the edge, especially when shooting movies, the edge can be literally anywhere, right? You know, you're shooting a movie anywhere, and the ubiquity of that connectivity, even 5G as it rolls out, is only really going to be practical in super dense metropolitan areas. Like that's where we're going to see the big 5G deployments. And so if you're shooting in a metro area, sure, you know, you could probably do camera to cloud like relatively quickly. You could probably do that with 4G today, but then when you get out into the really remote areas, if you're shooting a film in the middle of a cornfield in Kansas, that right there is going to prove a lot more challenging. And it's then how, you know, what's the next method? You know, do you fall back on an old method to get the raw stuff into the cloud? Does it look something like you take that, you know, you take a hard drive and you plug it in at some location and that gets shipped up to cloud, and then you're into all this like concern about security, as Emily already stated, is you know, security is a huge concern in the film industry, and that is kind of wraps back to, you know, a demand question. One of the things that we saw was a huge transition from people accessing the cloud over VPN to private direct connectivity because of those, not just like the bandwidth concerns. VPN has certain limitations to how much bandwidth you can practically ship over to it. And then also the security concern that you're still writing over the public internet on VPN. And that private direct connectivity gives you an extra layer of security, because that's all security is just how many layers can you throw on there to give it a little bit more. And so that was one of those areas that we saw a big shift, that, well, VPN isn't cutting it anymore because of our demand and security precautions, and so we want to shift it over to this private connectivity.
Ben, let's come to you. As all of this advances, how is connectivity meeting this moment? What role, to Anna's point, you know, where is the public internet? Are we going to need to find other ways of reaching the cloud? How does this all work with our current infrastructure?
So answer is it depends, but I want to address, like, so Rami's doing some really cool stuff with camera negative to the cloud, and you know, when is the sort of the blockbuster world going to be moving to a cloud-based workflow with, you know, camera negatives? That's the $1 million question. Nobody can put a time frame to it, but think about live production, right? AWS obviously bought Elemental for a reason. Google purchased was it Envato or some other company,
and then
yeah,
Microsoft purchased Avere.
Yeah, and so they're gearing up for it, and I think it's definitely shows what the future is going to be like in that space, right? So we're already seeing it with live events out of necessity, right? Because people want to consume their content via streaming mediums. And so I think that's paving the way in a big respect towards this camera to cloud type workflow aspect, because I think it is a more efficient, you know, mousetrap for being able to do this at scale. And so around connectivity, you know, 5G is obviously hopefully going to have a lot of promise for this. You know, I'm sure we'll still see some SneakerNet in the near future. I saw somebody in the chat, a station wagon filled with SD cards. It's gave me a little chuckle, but yeah, I mean, there's going to be sort of that, you know, FedEx of big data that's going to be happening in the interim until sort of Nielsen's law catches up with what media and entertainment need to do from a cloud-based workflow. But we're seeing more and more things like Teradici, I think, is probably a technology that everybody here is using or has used or is looking at, that's you know, condensing window sizes down to something palatable over a home internet connection. I know HP's got a new solution, VMware Horizon, kind of all doing the same thing, and so we're seeing for those remote workers a palatable solution over a variable connection, if you will, that's kind of homing back to the data center, where then it's going to have like a packet fabric 100 gig connection into the cloud d'Azure, and I think that's solving that problem in the interim, is that we're taking smaller elements, sort of a microservices approach to the artists and the remote workers and the digital nomads on variable connectivity, and bringing it all into a mega connectivity center. And so that's what I'm thinking is what we're going to see over the next few years to continue on that trajectory.
Emily, ILM, you're all still working from home?
Yeah, we're all remote. Everybody, San Francisco is still pretty closed down, so we're all remote.
So quite a few companies have kind of indicated, most of our member companies are saying, we're kind of home until further notice. We don't know, everybody's looking at the fall. Everybody's wondering about whether we can get kids back in school and a million other things. But all of a sudden, these short-term solutions are taking on a level of permanence. So how do you collaborate with people that you used to brainstorm at the coffee maker in the morning or over lunch or in the hallway? How does collaboration in an organization like yours get done with everybody remote?
I do miss our cafeteria and the coffee machine discussions, but fortunately, my team, the DevOps team, actually has been remote from the beginning to a certain extent. So some of our members have always worked remotely, and it's actually been a great blueprint for how we can work as a larger organization remotely. Lots of just specific times to just catch up with people. And a lot of times that'll spark other conversations that become a little bit more creative and a little bit more work oriented. And it's really about trying to stay connected without staying exhausted. Right?
Well, then,
how many Zoom meetings we have.
So if this is how you've always worked, right, your team.
Yeah, my team.
And it's a blueprint for others. I noticed John mentioned a few minutes ago something about returning. Mm-hmm. And the question we all have is, returning to what, right? What is this going to be a return to? And a colleague of ours, board member from Warner Brothers, said the other day that, we're building systems and capabilities, right, that were done immediately for the short term, but they're getting better and better and better. Mm-hmm. And the question is going to be, in a year from now, will we want to go back to our workflows of 2019? And the answer is probably not, right? So, John Canning, jump in here. What is your?
Yeah, I mean, I think.
What do we return to? What is it like when this is the virus is under control?
Knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting is, talking to some companies, even outside the media and entertainment, but more in the adjacent, right? So gaming, for example, I know one large game company is doing a phased approach that the end of their phases will still have only 3 days a week in office. Mondays and Fridays will be working remotely. I think what's interesting is, so for example, we're talking about production. We have a mocap stage, right? And I still have to have folks that, after this call, I'm headed down there. You still have some physical in person, but we look at the size of building we're in and like, do we need that? How many people, we still have those moments that we want to be able to either gather or, let's face it, doing color correction and things like that. Sometimes it is nice to be able to be looking at it on a screen that's bigger than what you got at your house. But I think that's the interesting is now it becomes much more of a selective or optional, it less than everybody's got to go back. There will be certain departments that don't have to necessarily. There'll be certain folks that so it's more of a choose and option than I think it's going to be we're all shuffling back. But it introduces a whole lot of HR challenges, right? Like who gets to do that? Who's, like what are the parameters? Like the operational minutia is a challenge.
But the industry is being transformed.
Yeah.
We're going to be a great deal different when we come out of the other side. Rami, is this the biggest community crisis of our lifetime? Do you look at it that way? How has the last year impacted? How big is this on a scale of 1 to 10?
It's unimaginable. And I think it'll take us years to process. And I think it will change our industry forever. Much more than the Japan tsunami fast-tracked, videotape, demising videotape and transitioning to files and LTO backups. you know, clearly this is like a behavioral change for the world, including our industry. It has somewhat to do with technology, but just the fact that this much of our community and humanity have have already adjusted to working from home, that's what will change our industry forever. So, you know, as we go forward, and I think we are rounding the corner, a good portion of that humanity will work from home voluntarily. And a lot of people miss the camaraderie. I mean, we're a creative industry. You know, let's not, you know, let's not suggest that it's better for us to creatively iterate from our respective homes. However, that will continue to happen. And then when you can or want, you want to go to those places where that camaraderie, that physical interaction is irreplaceable. So it's gonna, you know, just like hybrid cloud, it's gonna be a hybrid home or going to work.
Mhm. A colleague of ours in the organization went from working on WandaVision on a Friday night after 80-hour weeks to start Monday on Hawkeye with Jeremy Renner for the Avengers franchise, and was indicating that the VFX editor, the level of demand for high quality VFX are just as strong for a 2-hour movie that they're working on or a 6-hour movie that they're making for Disney Plus. So and another studio colleague from another brand A and brand B, but another studio across the street was saying that the investment in feature films will probably be increased because they are going to have to be on a whole new scale of event tentpole impact in the marketplace. All of these are effects driven. Do we look at the visual effects business in the next year or two, and are we hopeful about full employment and, you know, appropriate cost savings, but at the same time, kind of a robust marketplace? We'll start with you, John. What do you think?
Oh, there's commentary to be added into there. I think, look, the demand is vastly increasing. I think the industry is going to struggle with the economics are shifting, right? There is no doubt about the economics are shifting, right? The blockbuster, go throw it in the theater, and that's the elephant in the room for the industry. The streaming business is exploding, but what do those economics look like? And I think the interesting thing is everybody wants feature level VFX in their episodic. Are they bringing those kind of budgets? No. So, you know, the interesting thing is that there's a squeeze here, right? There is a challenge that the demand is certainly exploded. The, you know, level of quality expected is high. The question is there the budgets that are commensurate to supporting that? And it's an interesting challenge because, you know, we all have to shift our businesses.
So
paying for it?
Well, then cloud's going to help us do that. And Anna, the job of a technologist like the work you do is often to make the technology invisible so the storytellers can focus on their job. Can you talk about the view of networking in light of collaboration and storytellers?
Yeah. So technology for technology's sake tends to never be very interesting. It's all about what people can do with technology to better lives, to save lives, to entertain. It's all about the utility of the technology, and the value to anything is in the data, right? The technology without data it's pointless. It's a rocking chair. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. And the power of data is in it being able to be moved and utilized by lots of different resources. You know, it's the thing, you know, if you film a movie and it sits on that camera for the rest of its life, what good has it done? It's not until you're able to shift that, you know, to shift it to VFX and shift it all around. And that's the role of the network ultimately. You know, the network plays an incredibly important role in this, in what technology does, because without that movement of data, there's really not anything interesting in technology or data. And the thing with the network is that it's always been this very high manual touch sort of discipline, right? Where it's a lot of people having to do a lot of very intricate technical things, and it takes a long time. If you want a connection from point A to point B, it's going to take 90 days. And a lot of people have to get on keyboards and type things. And in my opinion, the role of technology, especially the network, is to be that silent partner that enables, empowers everything that makes innovation and data interesting, right? Like, we should be that silent partner that operates in a very fast and very smooth and very automated way to make things happen. And the technology is definitely not the thing that should be at the forefront. It should be something that is effortless and graceful in the background, that enables all this, all the cool stuff to happen, from films to improvements in medical and all of that. So
What are the Emily, what are the expectations that your leadership has for migrating to the cloud, and what kinds of things are you looking to try to accomplish in the year ahead, as opposed to last year, which was very much about solving immediate problems?
Yeah, I think a certain amount of cost savings is what I personally would like to look at. And with the cloud, it's really nice to be able to sort of play around with what's the right combination of knobs and dials for me to get the best output with the best cost, and how can we sort of minimize our footprint when we're not doing static lighting builds or something very intensive, so that we can sort of scale up and down as needed. So that is an area that I would certainly like to dig into this year, since we've proven out that it can be done in sort of a hybrid environment. Now it's to make it even more efficient.
What innovations have we seen or are seeing being invested in moving forward? John Canning.
Gosh, I think that's the interesting thing. A lot of across the board, the collaboration tools across the board, right? Like, let's face it, everybody knows what our lives were like with even this tool we're using right here. Pre this, there were a lot of things that were kind of fly by night. There were kind of, and all of our collaboration tools came under the microscope, and the need to raise their game and to become professional level, to become secure. That innovation maybe evolution, was, I think, an interesting place to see a lot of pacing forward. The ability, the virtual production is a whole end-to-end big amorphous blob, and depending on what part of the business, you've got a different definition of virtual production. But the tools and techniques along the way to enable different aspects of that, even remote viewing of a production, and being able to see, somebody that is being able to watch the production, whether it's a live production or mocap, and being able to see accurately what's going on and have minimal delay, and to make an impact, to do remote color correction. All of these things have been interesting innovations that have just really moved forward.
I saw your comment that we may be, afraid to unleash creatives until the cost issues get under control.
Everybody's got the horror story, right? Everybody's got the horror story of somebody who left a remote server farm just cranking over the weekend and got the bill because they didn't shut the nodes down after they rendered. Or somebody said, oh, you mean I can render now in a day what would take me X amount of days if I just ramp all these nodes up and go? Well, of course. So it's sort of like giving the keys to the Ferrari to the kid and saying, go give it a whirl.
Are egress cloud costs a concern as well?
Yes.
Yeah, God forbid you want to download your whole project that you built, right?
And was that
yeah,
you?
I mean, I like the subtle ping from the sidelines there. But I think, I mean, that's the big fear, right? Like, we have a ton of data, we get it up there. Oh, wait, like, when do we need to bring the project down? There's getting it into the cloud. Everybody makes it very easy to get it in the cloud. Getting it back and moving it around then becomes the challenge. And let's face it, if you're working with one studio one day and you're working with another studio another day, and you need to move that asset from point A to point B, how does that happen? How do I
Ben?
enable not pulling it down and pushing it back up again?
Ben, come in here.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing of the cloud, right, is, spoiler alert, it's just somebody else's computer, right? But
No.
just somebody else's, yeah, and probably Linux. But to compel companies like yours to use the cloud, right? What they have to do is make it cheaper, easily available, easily consumable, faster, scalable. All those things, really cool, microservices, party tricks that you can make things really interesting with, right? And so that's how they compel you to get in, right? But over the same bandwidth that they're using for you to upload all your stuff there, right? There's no contracts involved with the cloud, right? It can be billed minute, hour, month, or on a reserved instance basis. But since they're not doing contracts, they want to still feel a little secure in your using them for long term. So that's where the egress costs are. It's the hidden contract, if you will. And that's been a big barrier for media and entertainment, because at the end of the day, you need to pull down your finished job and get it out to your distribution, right? And so that's, and it's using the same bandwidth that you uploaded in, but now they're just going to charge you an arm and a leg. So, the Direct Connect with or ExpressRoute or with Google, they reduce the egress charges by about 8%. So that certainly makes things a lot more palatable when you're actually pulling your data down back from the cloud to send it out to your distribution arm. So that's sort of a secret trick, right? And then in terms of managing costs in the cloud, I don't think like Trusted Advisor is the best thing out there, but there's certainly cloud cost management tools out there that are making things a little more palatable. I've been kind of working on cloud costs in the background for a couple of years, still in alpha. I just need to get some more time, but I've been looking at getting real-time spot instance availability and cost, like in like a Wall Street style ticker going, because my genomic sequencing customers, my render customers, have been asking me to solve that for them for some time now, but it's in the works.
What tools have we seen that are being invested in that are making a difference?
Go ahead, Ron.
Oh,
No, please, Ben.
I mean, that's like an hour-long question, right? So
Give me one or two. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a lot about collaboration tools. Just looking at Rami's non-virtual background here, right? The whiteboard, the aha moments are something we're all trying to solve for. Nobody's got it down, right? Just getting a lot of brilliant minds in a room with a whiteboard, be able to solve the world's problems is something we're all trying to figure out. But what I'm seeing is from investment in tools, right? I think March was very reactive, right? We got to spin up a lot of VPN licenses and get everybody working remotely. Now, as John talked about, some of the more flexible, in the office working remote, I see companies moving towards a software-defined type perimeter, right? No longer the island that's guarded by the Great Firewall perimeter. Now everything's accessible on the internet, and so it's creating better security policies around data governance, right? And we can't. I think it's clear we can't wait for MPA and TPN to dictate how we do things. We need governance is always going to lag behind technology, and so being proactive about it is going to create the winners and the losers in this business for sure. But I think the investing, I'm seeing companies very, very intelligently looking at how they're investing in tools that are no longer going to be, okay, you do things this way when you're remote and you do things this way when you're on site. It's now going to a software-defined type solution that's going to be a solution that enables them to work the exact same way, whether they're home or on-prem or half the day on site and then the rest of the half day on a set or at home. I think that's really important that companies look to the future and design tools, solutions, and security around that type of workflow.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
We actually have a special guest here in the house.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yes. I would love to ask Dave Ward to jump in here and say hello.
The captain and commander.
I may have been plugging a few questions. For
Hey,
the
Dave Ward.
I'd like to put it on the record that yes, I have put a lot of bugs into software on the internet, but I am not responsible. Take it back, Canning.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, your question, I think is one. From a perspective of user of these things, the interest in two things. One of which I think there's a big fear of like getting locked in, and people are still like, well, if I get my data all over there, am I going to be stuck with that? And different cloud providers are offering, have different advantages in one way or the other, or there's legacy relationships. But I think the other interesting aspect of that is different studios are aligning potentially with different cloud providers. So, if you're working with Disney and Marvel on one project, you may have one, like the Universal folks doing a lot of work with Microsoft. Do you have to, as a vendor to these partners, be able to flow in and out of those different solutions? Because it may be dictated by your client that you're using a particular, I think these are all just big questions, right? Like but all sides are jumping into it going, well, I literally, the Avid question was interesting because there was working with a partner who they have their version of the Avid cloud. And the question was, is the previous team using their version of their Avid cloud, or is it our account on whoa, and nobody was really quite sure.
Yeah, so boiling it down to what I've heard Jim tease out of the panelists for the last 50 minutes or so is you're potentially shooting to cloud, then you're doing creative artistry potentially in a different cloud or in the same one where you shot to. Then you've got post to be able to work through and pull it all together. And then maybe you need to move it to another cloud to do rendering, and then you need to move it to another cloud for transcoding, and then maybe you're actually distributing OTT out of the same cloud you transcoded out of. That's some complex IT. Those are really complex workflows. And we were talking about get to cloud quite a bit 5 years ago, but now it sure seems like it's fully in a multi-cloud environment, and these multi-cloud workflows seem the norm. And what all the panelists were describing, and Emily, in particular, you were calling out how you're fully remote and you're involved in all stages of this development. And I'm just wondering, are you fully utilizing capabilities of all the different public clouds as well as different data center operators? What does the technology infrastructure look like underneath to get your job done now?
Yeah, it's interesting. For ILM XLab projects, we don't necessarily need to use any of the specific tools that are, the different cloud providers have acquired at this point. We treat them as servers. They are servers that just happen to be within a cloud. It's very much cattle and not pets, in that the way that our stuff is treated in our home data centers are the same that we treat in the cloud. So we actually are able to stay somewhat agnostic to wherever we're running our build processes.
Rami, is that the same for you as well?
To some extent. I mean, I agree about the get your ass to the cloud has been in progress for quite some time. Also, there is just a litany of amazing tools out there that have been there all along, whether it's Perforce for the virtual production community, or Shotgun for the VFX community, or Frame.io. Those have been there for quite some time, but there clearly are huge gaps, right? So just think 2 years ago, if we wanted to light up an internet connection on the outskirts of Georgia, we were met by a 1-year service contract. And we're like, well, but wait, the production only goes for 3 months. And they're like, who cares, right? So I think the thing that is so promising now are both the tech companies and the media ecosystem are understanding each other more than ever. In fact, there's people who even care about media and entertainment in the spaces like wireless services like Verizon and Google and AWS. That was not like that 4 years ago. So I think the vocabulary is becoming more familiar. in terms of how to deal with all the complexities and challenges of getting your data to the cloud. And clearly the hardest part of it is education, because production people are marginally interested in this discussion. You know, TV is like a freight train, right? They're already underwater to begin with. So, you know, you can't just bring anything that even feels like complexity. They're already underwater. So we have to essentially support them and insulate them. And that's kind of been our service framework. We'll figure it out. We will find how to get you from here to here. And that's primarily education. And that's what takes the most time, more than the technical workflow that has to be carved out for any given production.
Very,
Yeah,
very
just expanding on Emily's comment about, you know, cattle rather than pets. I'm seeing at a macro level sort of a contradictory phenomenon of this, right? So on one side, we have, you know, Docker containers, Ansible, infrastructure as code that's really bringing us towards that. We don't really care what cloud it is. We just want kind of the fastest, cheapest for any given workload. Boom, render, pull the job down, right? And then on the other side, you do have this proliferation of microservices that are, you know, pretty compelling, right? So think, you know, it could be Google's video intelligence for metadata tagging, right? And so there's sort of this juxtaposition right now where I'd say for a lot of certain workloads, we're seeing a complete decoupling of any one cloud, right? Going towards the cloud agnostic approach, which I think is awesome. And then on the flip side of that coin, we're seeing, you know, pretty vast adoption of microservices where you're building, you know, like the data warehouse on Redshift, or using Google Video Intelligence, or using, you know, Microsoft's advanced object detection with metadata tagging and stuff like that. And so it's an interesting juxtaposition, and you know, I guess we're all along for the ride to see how things shake out in the future.
Yeah, one of the unspoken promises of cloud, like, I know everybody talks about getting to the cloud, and everyone has got to the cloud for the most part. And the unspoken promise there has always been that cloud is not just going to enable you to do whatever magical thing, but be able to do that magical thing wherever it makes the most sense. Like that's been sort of the little secret, is that, yeah, this is part of the enablement, is that you'll be able to do this in Amazon, this in Google, this in Microsoft, this at your own private data center, this at a multi-tenant data center. And the piece that's always been missing there, the piece of that unspoken promise that nobody was ready to fulfill on, was the network. Because in order to fulfill that promise of being able to do the right thing in the right place, you have to be able to move that data quickly, affordably, and very programmatically too, because it can't have all those people sitting there pecking on keyboards anymore.
That's right.
Yep.
Right.
Network is code.
And it's not an amorphous blob, right? Like it's the, you know, how many of you have been talking to any one of the cloud providers and discovered where the deployment of the latest GPU cards are? Because I need to get to that data center. I don't need to get to the generic data center. And what is my connection to that data center? It still matters, right?
Yep.
It's not just like, oh, it's just out there and it's all the
Somewhere.
same.
Nope. It's still, and that's the thing, is cloud pretends to be this ubiquitous thing, but part of that promise is that specialization, getting to the GPUs, getting to the exact program that you need, being able to shift that data around quickly, silently, efficiently.
Dave, let me ask you, you've got a huge background in these sorts of things from a Silicon Valley perspective, and now in the M&E business. Where are we on this road? Are we 20% into our potential? Are we 50%? Are we in the middle? You know, are we in Act 1, Act 2, or Act 3 of the transition to cloud as an industry?
We're somewhere in that sausage making phase, without a doubt. And I think every one of the panelists, you know, is at a different percentage level. So I don't want to toss out how far they've gotten or where they are. And the audience has an even much higher spread, but we're definitely in the sausage making middle in working this out. I think, you know, Rami and Emily said it extremely well, which is, look, you can either just use it as a farm or a ranch, in Emily's case, for cattle and on how to use the cloud, or you can use it in Rami's case where, no, we need to use these tools, and look, it's still getting in the way. And so the CPU, RAM, and storage may be able to be used as code in the cloud. And Anna has brought the network as code to the piece of this with Ben as well. And really now it's just putting these pieces together to make it really, really easy, fast, and for John, cost effective. I'm not going to say cheap, I'm not going to say low cost, but I'm going to say cost effective, because that is the main piece. And look, we need a disruption in technology and we need a disruption in business. And that was kind of my takeaway from both sides of the coin that were described. And without those disruptions and without having all these pieces of easy infrastructure to be pulled together, we're not going to have entertainment as a service or content creation as a service. And that's hopefully where this can go for both the artists on one side, as well as those who are putting together long form and even short form content on the other side.
Our time is up. Emily, Rami, John, Anna, Ben, Dave Ward, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all panel. Special thanks to Packet Fabric and Shamrock for making this conversation possible, and special thanks to our producers, Lisa Gerber and Brett Harrison. Thank you all so much. Good luck. We'll circle back and have this conversation again, I hope. Thanks. Have a great year.
Bye.
Here.